Hello, and welcome to Android Developer Office Hours for Wednesday, October 24th, 2012. For those of you joining us this week, this is the show, or for the first time this week, this is the show where we normally answer questions live from developers via Hangout. And we're still going to do that at the end, but we're going to try something a little different this week. We have a pre-recorded set of questions, or pre-recorded question that we're going to answer in a bit of depth before we get started. So sit back, enjoy the show, and we'll resume the live broadcast afterwards and take any Hangout questions at that time. Play the video. Hello, and welcome to Dear Android, the show previously known as Android Developer Office Hours. We got a bit tired of developers always trying to show us up by asking us questions we couldn't answer every week, so we decided to try a new format for a change. We'll be selecting the best Android application development questions from across the internet, including Google+, and answering them for you here on YouTube. If you're watching us live, which is every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific, we'll be hanging around for a few minutes after each episode to answer any questions about the current episode. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to this week's question, which comes from Dancio on Stack Overflow, who's a user from Poland. He asks, if I have a custom service that I'm broadcasting via Bonjour, and that I'd like to either broadcast or discover using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, is this possible on Android? To answer this question, we have Alex Lucas, who's a member of our Android Developer Relations team, who wrote many of the docs about both network service discovery and Wi-Fi on our developer site. Alex, could you help us answer this question?
Absolutely. So to break the question into two subparts, will Bonjour-like services work on Bluetooth and will they work on Wi-Fi? The answer is yes on Wi-Fi, no on Bluetooth. Thank you for tuning in. That's our show.
See you, Alex.
Bye. So we should actually probably answer this question in a little bit more detail. To start with the Bluetooth part. Bluetooth is a really great protocol for lots of device-to-device applications like streaming music or communicating with heart rate monitors. But on Android, it does not actually support TCP. So what that means is you cannot create a TCP socket and connect to it over Bluetooth to other devices. Because network service discovery, or at least the Android implementation of network service discovery, run over TCP, this creates a fundamental incompatibility between Bluetooth and TCP. That said, it does actually work over Wi-Fi.
Alright, so before we go into a bit more detail, let's give a bit of background about what exactly NSD is. So NSD is Network Service Discovery, which is Android's implementation of multicast DNS, using the DNSSD, so DNS Service Discovery Protocol. And what this does is it allows applications to broadcast their existence on the local network, along with connection details for that application, to any other devices in the same proximity, which would be any other devices, again, on the same local network. So this is useful for things like social applications, games, or even network services like printers or web servers. So that way you can find what devices are nearby.
When NSD broadcasts this information over the network, there's 4 fundamental pieces of information it's going to send over. One of them is the device identifier. The device identifier is often going to be either the user's name or the device host name. Another item is going to be the service name. The service name is often going to be the name of the application. For instance, if you have a game called Replica Island that you want to play with other users over the network, and Replica Island has network service discovery built in, the service name is probably going to be something like Replica Island. Another item is going to be the host address, which you don't actually have to enter yourself at runtime. Android will just figure that out for you and send that along in the NSD packets. The final item is going to be the port. And I wanted to make a special note about the port, which is that for mobile applications, the easiest thing to do when you're designing the game or the application is not actually to pick your own port at runtime or hard code one in. What you want to do is get a server socket and set it to port 0. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell the Android framework, just give me whatever port is available on the system. When the server socket returns the port number to you, you then enter that port number into the network service discovery broadcasts. The handy thing about this is that if you, for instance, had decided that you wanted port 53 to be the one your application runs on, and some other application developer decided that they wanted port 53 as the one that their application runs on, there would never be a conflict, and there would never be an issue where the user had to choose between your application or someone else's application running at any given time.
Right, and this is a nice side effect. It means you don't have to request a reserved port from the IANA.
Right.
Now, you do still have to go and register your service name, but it's as simple as just filling out a simple form, and the chances of there being a conflict are pretty much non-existent.
Yeah, very small. You don't actually need the IANA reservation for when you're doing internal testing, but as soon as you let your application out onto the internet to roam free, it's a really good idea to get it registered.
Yes, it's just good practice.
Yeah.
Alright, now we talked a bit earlier about Bluetooth, and even though you can't use NSD on Bluetooth, there's another answer that we want to give you, a better answer, and that's called Wi-Fi Direct. Wi-Fi Direct is a peer-to-peer version of Wi-Fi, so it lets devices communicate with one another without having to go through an access point. This provides many of the same benefits as Bluetooth, device-to-device connections, but with the advantages of Wi-Fi, which means increased speed and increased range. This is available on devices running Android 4.0 or above, that's Honeycomb, and if you happen to be running Android 4.1, Jelly Bean, you also get service discovery. Now, unlike the traditional case of network service discovery, which we just addressed, Wi-Fi Direct service discovery will work even when you're not connected to a network. So think about that for a second. Devices running your application nearby can be detected even if they're not connected to the same network as you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. My favorite thing about that, what that basically means is if you're in a movie theater waiting for the previews to start, let's say you gone to the midnight showing or something like that, you have an hour to kill, you can open up the application and see who else in the theater or in line is playing the same game you are and connect to them and play a game, having no idea who they are.
Right, it gives you physical proximity.
Right, physical proximity, which is awesome because you know that the movie theater is not going to have a Wi-Fi network there. Yeah. And they're probably, a lot of them these days actually, are designed to block incoming calls and signals and stuff.
Yeah, but please don't use that as an excuse to play the game during the movie.
Right, don't play during the movie. There's lots of helpful previews that tell you that's just a bad idea and it's rude and there would be a bright screen and in front of the people behind you. And we're not suggesting that. But when you have time to kill, in line or before the previews, knock yourself out. Now, we do want to point out that it's still important to implement network service discovery for when you're connected to a network. There's a couple reasons for this. One of them is that Wi-Fi Direct is not going to work at all when you're connected to a network because of the way the underlying technology works. You're either connected to a network or you're surfing around for Wi-Fi Direct devices. The other item is that there are a lot of services and hardware that broadcast services that are designed to be discovered on a network. Examples of this are network cameras and network printers. Now, most companies will not set up their network printers to be Wi-Fi Direct accessible because that means anyone who is within physical proximity who didn't necessarily have permission to use that printer could print out whatever they wanted. So being on the network and requiring the user to be on the network provides a sort of permission system or just a small layer of security. So really your best option is to implement both Wi-Fi Direct and NSD, and that way your application will have the best of both worlds and increase the chances of your users being able to connect to each other no matter what circumstance. In order to use Wi-Fi Direct service discovery, the necessary class that you want to use is Wi-Fi P2P Manager, which provides an implementation of DNS-SD similar to the way standard NSD does. For more information about how to actually implement network service discovery and service discovery over Wi-Fi Direct, we have a training class available at developer.android.com/training, and we really recommend you go there and read through the tutorial. We also provide some sample code, and it walks you through a real-world example of how to implement this functionality in a pre-existing application.
Right. And if you have any questions about either NSD or Wi-Fi Direct, join us via Hangout after the live broadcast, where we'll be able to help answer those questions for you. All right? And if you have any questions for next week's broadcast, post them to Stack Overflow or send them to us via Android developers at Google+, and we'll pick the best of them for next week's podcast. All right? And with that, we'll see you all next week. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, guys.
All right, and we're back to the live show. Hopefully, those of you watching us live enjoyed that. If you are here with us live, feel free to hop onto our Google Plus Hangout. You can find the link by going to developers.google.com/live, clicking on the office hours link, and there'll be a bright red Hangout button. Feel free to hop on and let us know what you thought. Or if you have any questions about either network service discovery or Wi-Fi Direct, we'd love to take them now too. We have just a few questions in Moderator this week, so if you do want to join us on Google+, act quickly. We're going to go ahead and go through the pre-recorded, or the pre-submitted moderator questions while we wait for people to join us. So let's go ahead and go to the first moderator question, which a little difficult to read here, but so this is a question regarding Android Camp and CSSI, which is the Computer Science Summer Institute. It's a video question, and when we tried to play it this morning, it was actually a private video, so I don't know if it'll play now. Let's give it a shot, just in case. It's playing, I think.
Hey guys, I was wondering if you could answer some questions about Android. Alex is taught there this summer or something, but I was wondering if a high school senior could apply to Android Camp. I know that sounds a bit strange, but I'm developing the current Android app currently. I'm really interested in learning more.
Okay, I assume that was actually the entirety of the question, didn't get cut off. But yeah, so the question is, so for Android Camp, which is a program we hold, I believe, once a year for university students to come and learn a bit about Android development. So the question is, can high school students apply to it? So it normally is targeted towards university students because we expect a fairly deep knowledge of computer programming in general. It's a pretty fast-paced course, so we don't have a lot of time to go over the basics. But that being said, if you think you have a pretty solid programming background and can keep up, feel free to apply. No guarantees, of course, but just be sure to explain in detail what your programming background is, and make sure the people who are viewing the applications know that you can keep up. Now, that said, there's usually, if you're not in college yet, there might be some additional caveats about being under 18, but I'm not sure about the legalities of that since I run that program. But basically, go ahead and submit your answer, or submit anyway. Worst case that happens is you get turned down, and you can always apply next year. But we certainly love people to apply, so give it a shot. All right, let's move on to the next moderator question, which asks, we are creating a layout structure consisting of a horizontal scroll view that holds a linear layout that will hold any number of text-view children. The number of content is only known at runtime, and we want all the children to be of equal width, matching the widest. How? Oh boy. So this question must have gotten in there minutes ago, literally, because we checked all the questions before the show, and this was not there.
So is that a horizontal scrolling list view?
Yeah, so it's a horizontally scrolling list view with a linear layout containing text-view children. So basically, it's a horizontally scrolling list of text.
Not list view, but scrolling. Okay.
Yes. So that's a really good question because you don't have any of this until runtime. Now, what I'd probably do in this case is when pretty much any view gets laid out, there's a measure children method call. And so if you override that, you can modify the semantics about how everything is measured. And if you need, you can either go and force that to return a specific measurement, or you could go and actually fetch your list of children at that time. So this will get called at runtime, but you can fetch your children then and make sure you know exactly what the correct height and width is for your list view. And so that way, if the default behavior is not giving you what you want, you have a chance to modify it. So search for measure children. The argument to that should be a height spec and a width spec, which is also a very interesting class because it's actually an integer. But there's a create measure spec method that you'll want to use to go and create those. I said this is a class. It's not even a class. It's an integer. You have height spec and width class. With height spec and int spec, or God, I can't even talk. Height spec and width spec. Most of which are integers, but they're not normal integers. They're actually there's a special code with the way it's laid out. So you always want to use create view spec whenever you are defining those. But anyway, take a look at the measure children method, and that should give you all the details you need to go and override that behavior.
That's much better than my answer, which was just going to be add a bunch of white space to your text until it's all the same width. Actually, I don't even know that would work, because it might just it would have to be a monospaced font, and it might trim when doing the measuring anyway.
Right. So let's move on to the next question. Is there a way my app can be notified when it's uninstalled via some type of callback URL or broadcast? I need to be able to delete or deregister my users from the cloud. Wow, this one also is a last-minute addition to our list of questions. Right. Thank you for the question. Alex, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So there's no flag or there's no broadcast that's going to happen when your app gets uninstalled. The issue there is that there would be some security implications to code running as soon as it's uninstalled, especially for malicious apps. Like, obviously, like, I'm not implying your app is malicious, but it's a consideration we have to take into account. However, within the case of wanting to deregister and remove users from your database in the cloud, there's a couple different things there. First of all, the person might be uninstalling on one device, but not necessarily from all of their devices. So depending on how much space the individual is taking up, this might not be the right approach to keeping your database clean. What you can do, other options would include, automatically removing for inactivity after a year, or one option is actually to use Google Cloud Messaging, GCM. And what you could do there is periodically send, still alive messages basically to devices where your app is installed.
Well, I actually have a better idea in that case. I mean, that's
okay.
a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And in that case, there's really no need to use GCM. You could just have an alarm manager hook that says, okay, once a day or once a week, just wake up and send this ping to my server. I mean, there's no need to go out of your way to use GCM in that case.
That's true, yeah.
I usually like to say GCM is really good when you have unplanned events. So say an instant message comes in, or you're a device administrator telling a device it should wipe itself, right? I mean, these aren't things you can account for, and so that's where GCM really shines. But if it's just something that should happen once a day or once a week, don't go with the overhead of GCM. Just use Alarm Manager.
Right. That's true, yeah.
Because you have to keep in mind, too, every time you send a push message to a phone, it's additional network traffic on our end, it's additional server overhead on your end as a developer, and on top of that, it uses a battery unnecessarily, perhaps.
That's true. My mind went to GCM because we get this question a lot with GCM users of, I don't want to be continuously sending messages to someone who doesn't even have the app installed.
Yeah, no, that brings up another good question, though.
Sure.
And so how does GCM handle this, right? If you uninstall an app that uses GCM, how does GCM know that app no longer exists? I mean, it's the exact same problem I suspect whoever asked this question is trying to solve.
Right.
And the answer is actually that we don't know. When you uninstall an app, again, there's no way to unregister it. So what'll happen is the very next time you send a GCM or C2DM message to the device, it'll try and deliver it. The delivery will fail, and at that point we mark the device as unregistered. And if you try and send any more messages after that, then you'll actually get a failure on the server end as well. Right. So it's very much a lazy deregistration once we realize the device just doesn't exist and we can't address it anymore.
Yeah.
So even internally we run into those same security considerations and have to work around them. But the end result, I don't think, is actually any worse of a user experience. It still works exactly as it should.
Yeah. So I guess the summary would be there's no way to receive a message when the app is uninstalled. You can send a heartbeat from your app and then assume it's been uninstalled as soon as you stop receiving the heartbeat. But a single uninstall by itself, depending on the context of your application, of course, the uninstall by itself might not be a good enough reason to deregister the user and wipe their data from your database, as they may just be switching devices or letting someone else borrow the device and don't want to have access to their personal data available to the other person, or flashing the device, upgrading to a different device. There's all sorts of scenarios where you might not want to wipe their data just because because the app is at least temporarily uninstalled. Yep. So a timeout period like 6 months or a year or something, clearly defined to the user when they set up an account, probably a better way to go.
Yep. Now, if you do decide to implement a heartbeat, one plea: please don't make it more than, I'd say, once a day. I think would be reasonable for something like this. Even once a week, maybe. Once a day is reasonable. The reason I mention that is, again, battery life. Every time you have Alarm Manager wake the phone up, or you send a GCM message to a phone, the CPU has to run, the radio has to wake up. It actually on the whole ends up consuming a lot of battery life. One particular wake up's not bad. But if you're waking the phone up every hour, every 5 minutes, it adds up very fast. Yeah. So every time you wake the phone up, just remember there is a cost. Keep it to a minimum for your own user's sake.
Yeah, I would actually go so far as to say it's possible to design your app such that, like, if you're sending out other network data, like let's say you're using a web browser or something like that, the device is already awake, the radio is already on. Take that opportunity to send the heartbeat at that point, even if it's more than once a day, because that way that you're not waking the phone up, you're not turning on the radio, and you're basically in no way affecting the user's battery life.
All right. So shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah, shoot.
All right. So the next question comes from Terrence in Vancouver. Is there any way to query information about the LTE cell tower the device is connected to? Things like MCC, that's mobile country code, MNC, mobile network code, ECI, and TAC, which actually, to be honest, I can't remember what they stand for off the top of my head. So there is a telephony manager class which will tell you, I know definitely will tell you the MCC and MNC. I can't remember about the other two. It'll also tell you other things like the users IMEI and the equivalent. So IMEI is mobile identifier. I forgot. Yeah, but basically,
I think Verizon's is MEID.
Yes, that's the last thing of. Yeah. So, but I think it's still the same method call. It'll be like get IMEI or get device ID.
There are a lot of 3 and 4 letter acronyms associated with this thing.
There really are. But yes, it's all inside of the telephony manager class. The one thing I will warn you is to get access to a lot of those values requires the access phone state permission, which displays a very scary warning to users. So for that reason, I usually like to recommend not accessing these fields unless you really, really need to do it. If you're just looking for a way to identify the user, usually our recommendation is to just create a random UUID on first boot, stored inside of a shared preference file, and then read from that. If you really do need something that's not app-specific but device-specific, there's also a android.getSecureID method call that you can use, which is generated the very first time a user starts up their phone. Though there are, I believe, prior to Android, is it 2.0? I think there were some bugs in it that you have to be aware of on certain devices.
I think it was prior to Froyo,
which
is
pretty
2.2.
old. Yeah, I mean it's something to keep in mind, but there are still a few devices out there that particular method call will run into. So again, for that reason, we usually like to recommend using a per application ID rather than per device. And not only that, it's better for users' privacy. People don't like being tracked if they don't really need to.
Right.
But
that said, if it's the core purpose of your application, like one that I could think of that would make good use of this is I've seen sort of community generated reception maps where it's on a given carrier, like how good is my reception like here versus here, and that the application does that by having a few 100,000 people download it, and it just tracks GPS and signal strength and nearby cell towers for every user and uploads it into a central database. So for something like that, obviously you want to access this stuff, and it's going to make sense when the user looks at the permission, they're accessing this information on my phone, how else would it work? In which case it would be fine. If, however, you're making a flashlight app, it's going to look really scary and like you're doing something really sketchy.
Yeah. So I think, though, that is definitely a really good use. And again, if you do need to access that kind of data, Telephony Manager is the class you want. Yeah. So before we move on, let's take a look at Hangout to see if anybody's joining us live here. We do have a couple people live. So if anybody does want to speak live, we're going to go ahead and unmute the mic now. Feel free to wave and speak up, and you'll be on the show with us.
Hello, I have a question.
All right, we have one person. Do we have audio?
Yes.
All right, your microphone should be on. You might need to unmute yourself.
Okay. My microphone is on.
All right, we see you. We definitely do see you, but we're not hearing anything.
Go ahead.
Do we have both of the audio channels in here?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
All right, try talking one more time. Any luck?
Hello?
Yes, we got you.
We got you.
Okay. I have a follow-up to the Android Cam question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
For the CSSI, like Google Computer Science Institute, do you have any preference over for students with programming experience over those without?
Generally speaking, we do, if you have a bit more background, it certainly looks better. But that being said, from what I remember at the Computer Science Summer Institute, that one's a little bit more basic than Android Camp, right?
Yeah, that one I think was more geared toward people with little to no programming experience, whereas Android Camp is geared more to people with strong programming background already.
Right, but I mean, that being said, if you do have something to show to demonstrate interest, right, that always will help your application.
Yeah, definitely.
But especially in that case, we're not expecting as high a bar as we would for something like Android Camp.
Okay, thank you.
Totally.
Sure.
All right, any other live questions? I see at least 2 more people on the camera with us. Go ahead and hit the chat button. They might be typing to us. I just realized. So we're just reading the chat questions now. You'll have to forgive us. We normally have a computer screen in front of us, but Daniel Pham, our usual engineer, is traveling in London right now and took the studio laptop with him.
No additional questions.
No additional questions. All right. We'll still be around here if anybody else is watching live and wants to join us via Hangout. Once again, go to developers.google.com/live. Click on the office hours link, and there's a join Hangout button. We'd love to take questions on the air, and we'll be hanging around until we run out of questions on moderator. So let's jump back to moderator. All right. So the next question comes from I think is that Nick B in Amsterdam. You have to forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name here. My unpopular question below, slightly restated. Since 50% of the Android devices run API 10 to Google Stats, I assume that means the stats we publish on developer.android.com. What does it mean if you encounter a bug like the one I cited below? Are those bugs still being fixed? What about version numbers? And so going down 2 questions to I think the question he's referring to, the binding JavaScript code to Android code feature is buggy on Android version 2.3. Will this be fixed? All right, so that's a good question, and I think it's actually one there's sometimes some confusion about. So generally speaking, most of our development efforts does go into the latest Android version. So it's very rare for us to go and fix a bug in older Android versions. It's usually only if there's a security issue that will issue an update. And even then, it takes a while for those fixes to propagate to devices because OEMs have to go and create a new OS build and it has to get certified by carriers. So generally speaking, any bug fixes that aren't absolutely critical, which means they're not security issues, are only going to be addressed in the latest version of Android. So I know that's probably not what you want to hear, and I apologize for that, but that's sort of the nature of the way Android updates work, and we really don't have a good way to go and update those older devices reliably.
Yeah, it also, another factor is whether it's a carrier-managed device versus a Nexus device.
Right.
So, I mean, even if we did go back and fix a bug in Gingerbread, it could be several months depending on which carrier, which manufacturer.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying.
Integrating
OEMs
into their
need
own
to go and create a new
yeah,
OS
exactly.
build, and then it needs to get certified by the carriers. There's a lot of moving parts. Unlike application development where you just push it to Google Play and it goes live. The timeline from when we make a change in code to the time it can actually get on a handset is actually pretty long. There's a lot of certifications that happen. There's a lot of QA. There's you have to get approvals. It's quite a process. We try and get devices out to the devices we manage as quickly as possible. Some OEMs and some carriers are better than others, but in general, we do try and get those updates to phones as quickly. I think everybody in the ecosystem tries to get those updates out as quickly as possible. But again, the older the phone is, the more difficult it is, and at least internally at Google, all of our effort goes to the latest version. Now, I will add one last thing. It is possible to go and backport changes to older versions of Android, and I have seen that happen on some cases where a device manufacturer knows that they're not going to be able to update a phone. Perhaps they're spending their engineering time somewhere else, or the phone just simply doesn't support it anymore. I have seen cases where they'll go and backport that one particular change without doing a complete OS update. So it is possible, but I'd say it's more rare. In order for that to happen, also, it has to be a bug that's big enough to actually get the OEM's attention.
Right. At that point, it also becomes confusing as a developer because then there's no way to sort of shoehorn in an SDK version between, like in this case, it would be between 10 and 11. The SDK version's an integer, so we can't add a 10.5 for the version of Gingerbread that has this thing fixed. And then and then if you released your app, assuming that this particular bug was fixed, it would go to, if half of the Gingerbread devices it happened on, half that didn't, you wouldn't really necessarily be able to distinguish between devices where your code worked and devices where it didn't. So in the long run, it wouldn't actually probably help all that much.
All right. So hopefully that answered your question. Let's move on to the last moderator question. This one comes from Jay Dixon in Perth, Australia, who says, we support a benevolent organization who wishes to donate in-app purchases, content, to its customers, which are their users. All right. They wish to pay the purchase price. However, they can't see a way to do that in Google Play. Is there a way to do this? So, Alex, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So there's no fine-grained solution in terms of purchasing specific apps for on the behalf of a different account. What you can do, however, is buy Google Play gift cards and give those to the users. Obviously, this isn't ideal in that it has a certain lack of control, and that if said customers are fourth graders or something like that, there's a chance that instead of buying the awesome note-taking app, they're going to spend it on Angry Birds. But it's still an option, and you can get them, I want to say, in increments of like $20-25, something like that. That's the way I would go.
Yeah, so not the best solution, but unfortunately, it's the only one we have available.
Yeah,
right now.
It's the current solution.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so let's switch back to moderator, or sorry, to Hangouts one more time. If there's any other live questions, we'll go ahead and take those now. Anybody on live questions who wishes to ask us something? I see 3 people there.
There's one question.
Okay, so there's a text question from David Cox. It was a little unclear from the video, but is it possible to use NSD and query services over Wi-Fi Direct at the same time? So yeah, that's entirely possible. NSD will work over any TCP connection, and Wi-Fi Direct is a TCP connection. So normally what you do is you'd use actually they work pretty well together for that because of the nature of Wi-Fi Direct. Yeah. But Wi-Fi Direct has an implementation of NSD. Essentially, they broadcast the service information as Wi-Fi, like as part of the Wi-Fi discovery data, right? Before you're even connected.
We do get into a bit of buzzword collision here.
Yeah.
There's a bit of confusion in that there's network service discovery. It works over a network. It's find everything that's on the same network as you are. Separately from that, there's service discovery over Wi-Fi Direct, which is find stuff when you're not connected to a network. Now, when NSD comes into play is if you use Wi-Fi Direct and you then connect to a network, use Wi-Fi Direct to sort of create an ad hoc network between a bunch of different devices. At that point, NSD, Network Service Discovery, comes into effect because there's a network for it to work on.
Right. So Wi-Fi Direct will help you find other devices in proximity.
Right.
Say they support your app. You'll connect to them via Wi-Fi Direct, and then you'll use NSD, the proper NSD that we addressed at the beginning of the video, to go and find everything once you're connected. Right. Which also will work outside of Wi-Fi Direct. If you're on a normal, regular Wi-Fi network, you'd use the same NSD.
Correct.
Right. So hopefully that answered your question. If you do have any more questions about that, just let us know. Next question from Terrence Yu says, is there any way to query information about the LTE cell tower the device is connected to? So things like MCC, MNC, etc. We actually answered this earlier. I don't know if you missed the answer or not. So unless you want to know the specific cell tower. The answer is yes. All of that should be contained in the telephony manager class. Unfortunately, I can't tell you the exact method names off the top of my head, but there is a way to go and get a list of the cell towers there in range. There's a way to go and query the active cell tower. I will say that the MCC and MNC are not typically... Actually, no, excuse me, those are properties of the cell tower. What am I thinking? But they're also properties of the SIM card, so you have to watch out for that, too.
I'm really impressed you know all this off the top of your head.
But no, there's ways to go and query all of that. You can get it for the current SIM card. You can get it for the current tower. All of that should be contained inside of the telephony manager class. If you dig around in there, you'll find all the data you're looking for. All right. Any other live questions, either via chat or via... if you have a webcam and microphone, you can hop on live, too. I'm taking the silence as a lack of questions. So at this point, I'm going to say that's it for this week. If you do have... I'll add one last thing before we close. Let us know what you thought about the new format earlier, the Dear Android show. I think it worked pretty well, but of course we care a lot about what our viewers think too. So if you thought you liked it, let us know in the YouTube comments. If you hated it, let us know in the YouTube comments.
Right.
And assuming people like it, I think we might keep doing something like that in the future.
And if they hate it, we'll just assume because it's, YouTube comments.
It's true. It's true.
And then we'll just
YouTube
keep on doing
comments
it
are
anyway.
a little bit painful.
Right.
Anyway, it was awesome chatting with you all this week. Be sure to send us in your Android development questions, either via moderator or also just go ahead and plus us on Android developers too. We'll be taking a look over the next couple days for the next question and answer for the next Dear Android segment. We'll pick the best ones, and we'll join you again next week, Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific.
Cool.
All right. And one last thing, thanks to Lewis Gray, who is our producer this week, for valiantly stepping in and keeping the show running. So thank you so much. All right, see you all next week.